I figured we would have a friendlier discussion if we're all sitting around the table, and you're in Canada, so let's go friendly today. All of the questions are definitely open to answering from both of you. A couple of them will reference things that you had in your presentation because all of them are made up as I saw your presentation. And so I'm just going to start with kind of like the most burning question across each of your presentations. And so Pedro, I'll start with you. Good news is you did not get to go through your Terminator slide. You're going to get a slight chance to now because I saw something on there. I'm going to ask you to put your 20 years in the future hat on. And the reason being, I think a lot of what you said, if you were taking, for example, a 5-year time horizon, just seems completely spot on. I'm just wondering if you would have the same opinions if you fast forwarded. So the two that I wanted to chat about were, we saw Suzanne's presentation on sort of jobs and what that looks like, extrapolating out to 2030. And we saw Jack's presentation on how things can move in 5 years. So for jobs, are you as confident 20 years out that we shouldn't be scared of?
No, yeah, so very good question. I don't know about 20 years in particular, but I think, and this very much, I think is relevant to what Jack was talking about. You know the saying that in the short term, technology has less impact than we thought it would, and in long term more? AI is a great example of that. And I think that in the short term, AI will have less impact on jobs than we imagine. In the long term, and I can't tell you what the long term is. It could be 100 years, it could be 500, it might just be 20 or 30. It surely won't be less than that. But we can imagine a future in which AIs can do pretty much everything that humans can do better. Since we can imagine that, and that would be a big issue, we might as well think a little bit about it now, right? So what will happen, at that distance, I think we will have a very different society, right? Maybe we will have a time where people will look back on those barbaric times when you had to work for a living. That was just horrible. People were wasting their lives slaving away, right? And now they're actually free. And they have other ways to make their life meaningful. Now, I think
you see that with millennials a little bit, just saying I want my job to have meaning. Working for money is like not enough, or it's not
exactly. But what you want is your life to have meaning. The meaning doesn't have to come from the job.
Take your point. And so on the other side of it, the thing I saw, I think on your last slide was fearing artificial stupidity more than artificial intelligence in the short term. Does that also extend out 20 years?
Yeah. So, my main point in that slide is the following, is that this is very ironic. We are all worried about AIs that are too intelligent. And in fact, the thing that we should be worried about is AIs that are too stupid. Because AIs that are too stupid are making mistakes, consequential mistakes in the world today. Right? They're flagging sometimes the wrong people as criminals. They're even recommending, like from small things to large, right? They could give credit to the wrong people or vice versa. And I think these mistakes will always happen because you can't do these things perfectly. So if this is the biggest danger, then what we want to do is, make AI smarter. Smarter AIs are safer. There's nothing more dangerous than stupid AIs. Now, to answer your question directly, let's imagine a future where we have AIs that are incredibly smart, right? Way smarter than we are. Should we be worried about this? And the answer, in my mind, is still no. And actually, for a very interesting reason, is that the job of it, one definition of AI is that it's solving what are called NP-complete problems using heuristics. NP-complete problems are basically all the things that we do, and the defining characteristic of them is that it takes exponential time to solve them, but it only takes polynomial time to check the solution. We want the computers to do the exponential work. All that we have to do is the polynomial work of checking the solution and setting the goals, very important topic for discussion, deciding the objective functions and the constraints. And this takes far less intelligence than to solve the problems. Think about it. We're building AIs today to cure cancer. Do you want to limit the intelligence of those AIs because they might suddenly decide to revolt against you? An AI is not a human being in disguise. An AI is just a very smart optimizer. An AI revolting against you makes no more sense than your right hand revolting against your brain.
I might be an AI in disguise, though.
Yeah.
Just wanted you to know. Aaron, you had a bunch of really powerful visuals in your presentation that just kind of blew my mind. The one that's sticking in my head most, though, is maybe unintentionally powerful. So I don't know if you guys all remember seeing that slide that had the grayscale, where you had, it's kind of grayscaled into oblivion, and so you had privacy, fairness, accountability, interpretability, but then you had the word morality literally fading into oblivion. does morality fade into oblivion as we look forward? What's the path to making sure that doesn't happen?
So I didn't mean that as an ordering of importance. Obviously.
I took it as tractability of solving the problem, or how far we were so far.
Yeah, it's how far we are, I think, in thinking sort of precisely about these things. Obviously, morality is important, but what does that mean? You know, there's sort of, in privacy especially, but starting just a little bit in fairness, there's starting to be ways to think about these things mathematically, precisely. For morality, you know, there's the very well publicized Moral Machines project at MIT, but that's, you know, it doesn't come close to capturing in any kind of formality what you or I would mean by morality. So, yeah, that wasn't a list of sort of priorities, that was a list of progress, I think.
This kind of factors into the next question I wanted to discuss, which is the kind of the balance between speed and embedding of ethics, right? Because obviously the embedding of ethics and all of the other things on your list is going to take time to figure out. Be curious to see whether those things come in lockstep. So Ajay's presentation today showed that obviously there are winner-take-all dynamics in AI, which means that just speed is paramount if you want to win in anything. And so how do we think about the balance between moving really quickly to ensure we win and making sure we have sufficient ethics embedded in our algorithms?
Yeah, so I think those are related, and speed is important. That's sort of part of the usefulness of machine learning. It can speed up by many fold, like boring tasks that humans don't want to do. But that's part of what makes the sort of approach of purely human regulation infeasible, that it doesn't scale. So if we want to take Pedro's approach of just having the machine solve the NP-complete problems, and then every time we have a human being like check it to see if it's okay, that's not a terribly scalable solution. Better would be to figure out like what we mean when we say that we want the algorithm to have such and such properties. We want it to be private, or maybe we don't. We want it to be fair, or maybe we don't. If we can specify precisely enough what we mean, then we don't have to rely on purely human oversight.
Okay, that's something. So your question reminds me of the old saying among computer scientists that hardware progresses exponentially, software progresses linearly, and humans don't. So, right, given that this is, to a first approximation the case, what do we do? I actually think there is, again, to a first approximation, a good answer to this, which is to realize that AI algorithms, and machine learning ones in particular, actually have different components. A very big component on which we spend a lot of time is the optimizer, is the thing that figures out how to solve the problem well. We can go full tilt on that. The faster progress we make, the better. There's nothing to lose there. And then there's another very important component that tends to sit under the hood today, and that is the objective function. This is what the algorithm is trying to optimize. That is not for the algorithm to decide, and that is not for the engineer to decide. That is for the humans to decide, as flawed as they might be. So what we need to do is expose the objective function. We need to have techniques that will optimize whatever you give it to. Aaron has one notion of fairness, I have another, Shivon has another. That's fine. We all set algorithms according to our goals. So for example, I would like to tell Twitter that I'm tired of seeing tweets about Trump. I don't want tweets about Trump. There's a lot of people who I follow for machine learning reasons, and then every now and then they suffer from Trump derangement syndrome, but I don't want that. I want to tell Amazon that I just bought a watch, so I don't need recommendations for more, right? These are kind of like banal examples, but at a higher level, I think, for example, the job of legislatures and we, the voters, we, the people, is to determine the objective functions. And then they get optimized. So each of these things progresses at the speed that it should, given that one is machine and the other one is human.
So you mentioned that obviously we all have various notions of fairness, and we don't agree on a whole bunch of things. So when we think about unleashing these AI algorithms in the world, at what point can we push the button? Should we push the button, and what point should we say, no, this thing is not ready? Like, what's the framework for that in both of your heads?
Yeah, so I think that Pedro made a very good point that we shouldn't let perfect be the enemy of the good. It's possible to have an algorithm that we don't like in certain respects. We think that it's not perfectly fair, but it might still be better than the human decision maker. And these impossibility results that Pedro alluded to, that there are different reasonable things that we might mean by fairness that are just mathematically incomparable with one another, Well, those impossibility results apply just as much to human beings as they do to algorithms. So, you know, one of the problems with this optimization framework is that, yes, you know, a human being satisfies an objective function and then specifies an objective function, and then we unleash, you know, some maniacally efficient optimizer. One of the problems is that it's hard to anticipate what all of the effects of that optimization will be, except that it will do a really good job as measured according to your objective function. And that's really the source of all of this and why you need to be careful. So I think it's a bad idea to, you know, on anything, to just sort of go ahead and press the button and let it have control without thinking very carefully about these issues. By and large, we're not doing that yet. So when I listed all of these important areas that machine learning was being used, like in criminal recidivism prediction, in none of those areas are we literally letting the algorithms
decide by itself, at least, right?
Yeah.
So this is a great question on which a lot could be said, but let me just make a couple of points. There is never a time when we should take our eyes off the algorithms and assume that they'll do fine. They need to be continuously monitored. However, the choice of when to deploy an algorithm is not, oh, I'm only going to help self-driving cars when they're perfect. No, it's when they're better than the alternative. And you know, on this subject of objective functions and how we interface with the machines, Stuart Russell actually has an interesting book out where he makes a proposal that I think is very sensible, which is the following. A lot of the problem in all this is that we want to boil down our interface to the machine to a formula that we can write in one line, whether it's accuracy or accuracy plus fairness or whatever. And this is ridiculous. I know it's convenient, but you can't do that. So his proposal is that the machines should spend as much time figuring out what our objective functions are as executing them. And that is the only way that you can make things safer, even though they'll never be perfectly safe, but they're not perfectly safe with humans either.
We're running short on time here, so I'm going to run completely full circle with a slightly ethereal question. What was the question actually going to be, though? Oh, I know what it was. You'd mentioned, actually, that so a lot of criticisms of these algorithms are actually unfair because they are fairer than the human baseline or whatever other alternative we have today. So if these things are pretty rudimentary and already fairer and better than us in some ways and more moral, is AI going to lead us to a superior morality? It's the opposite of oblivion?
So I do want to emphasize that, like, at no point do I or anyone I know want to suggest that AI should have any role in deciding what morality means. And so, like, I think the answer to your question is no. Like, it can't lead us to a superior morality. But to the extent that it forces us to think harder about what we're doing, I mean, these fairness issues that people think about with AI, it's not that these are new issues. It's that, thinking about things like false positive rates is just unavoidable when you've got an algorithm and easy to ignore when you've got a human being. So to the extent that it forces introspection, it might indeed lead us to be more thoughtful about morality and eventually to have a fairer society. That's the thing we want to aspire to.
I don't know if AI will lead us to a superior morality, but I do know that it will lead us to a different morality. And this, I think, is a point that is often unappreciated when we think about AI and ethics, is that technology shapes society, and society shapes ethics, as much as the other way around. All of our effort so far has gone into making AI fit our existing notions of ethics, but we know that those are going to change. I mean, if AI really is halfway as a big of a change, as people talk about it being, how could morality not change, right? Think about feudalism, right, and the moral principles that they had versus ours. Ours are different largely because there were technological changes that took us here. And AI will change our morality. We'll be a different society, and we need to start thinking about that. What is the morality that we're going to have in a world that is suffused with AI? And this, I think, is a sorely under-researched subject.
I want to thank you both for your wonderful presentation and for being very engaging panelists. I hope everyone gives them a round of applause.
Thank you.